Hello, my name is Lon Safko, co-author of the Social Media Bible, published by John Wiley & Sons, the most comprehensive book ever written on the subject of social media. And today, we are doing something rather unusual for our Executive Conversation podcast. We're here with two members of Media Sauce, the President, David Cain, and Vice President James Burns. And we're going to be talking today about social media-enhanced websites and, of course, social media. So, David, James, wow, it's awesome to have you here today. This is great.
Thanks, Lon. It's great to be here.
Cool.
I agree. We're really excited about the project.
Yeah, it's fun to have you on board. I'm really glad. It took a really long time to find the right company, and I love your philosophy, and that's why it's important to do this interview with you guys. So, David, can you kind of kick off the interview here with telling us a little bit about what your background is, who you are, Media Sauce?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's David Cain. I'm president of Media Sauce. I've been with the company since it started, probably 6 or 7 years ago. We're an organization that believes that the world is changing, and we have for many years, and it's starting to pick up speed and happening more and more, but the world is realizing that it's more than just online as another platform. It's online as a transformational force that is going to drive into an organization and make it completely different than it ever was before. Industries, lives, business, how everything works is fundamentally different, and we're at Media Sauce the partner for that.
That's exciting to hear, and I love the term transformational force. I completely agree, which is the purpose of the book. It is transforming the way people are doing business. James, can you tell listeners a little bit about who you are and what brought you to Media Sauce?
Absolutely. I worked in the traditional media business for about 7 or 8 years, focusing on how the Internet was impacting the way people communicate, engage, and consume information. I worked for both publicly traded newspaper and television companies, and to watch and see how the Internet was making an impact on those industries, it kept me constantly looking at what the opportunity was to integrate those behaviors of consumer engagement and consumption into the business world. And when I had an opportunity to join Media Sauce as a leader nationally in Internet strategy and creative storytelling, I really felt like it was a great fit to be able to enhance and take that education and to spread it within the business community and the association community.
And I think that's an awesome background to have because with social media, a lot of times nowadays we're hearing the term citizen journalism. And I think that really there's a huge transformation between magazines, newspaper, and other printed media and online sources of information. I think that's a great background.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think the biggest thing with citizen journalism and really the higher level of just user-generated content has always been the paradigm between trust and transparency with communication. I think that's the one thing that has kept the barrier there between traditional media and what we would call new media or user-generated content media. And I think that'll be the ongoing opportunity for organizations to take advantage of as we move forward.
And again, I heard another word in there that keeps coming up in all of these Executive Conversation podcasts is trust and transparency. We've grown not to trust conventional media because of the massive expense that's associated with it. Almost always, there's some kind of a hidden agenda with conventional media where this inexpensive and most often free social media has a tendency to kind of be more transparent, more truthful, more from the heart, and less apt to contain a hidden agenda. Do you agree?
In some capacity, yes. I think in some capacity, it's the appearance of transparency also creates the opportunity to promote an agenda. So it's a very careful balance.
Okay, that's a good point. Controversy, I like it. As we go through these questions, what I'd like to ask you guys, whoever wants to field it, that's cool. And if you both want to field it, that's also cool. If you could just mention ahead of time, just tell us your first name, because we're going to have this transcribed, put into the book. And for the transcription person, it will drive her crazy if she doesn't know who's talking. So if we can do that, and that's cool. Overall, social media has changed the development of corporate websites, the way we're doing business on the Internet. Who wants to kind of address how that's changed?
James, I'd be happy to speak to that first. I think the biggest thing about it is the realization that we've gone from a one-to-many broadcast message where we're publishing information that we want our consumers, prospects, and customers to hear, to actually requiring ourselves to be prepared to actually have real conversation with our customers. It's transforming the way we have to engage in the sales and prospecting process, the marketing process, customer relationships, customer support. the biggest opportunity that's sitting forth to us today, how do we create these conversations in a way that also allows us to promote our message and promote our products and services? I think that the biggest challenge for organizations as it comes forward is the reality that people have an opportunity to converse. They're not always going to be saying the things that you want them to say, but in the same context, you have an opportunity to engage and really create transparency, as we mentioned before, by addressing both the good and the bad of how consumers are experiencing your product or your service or your brand, and turning them into excited consumers about your product if you properly engage them with these tools. So it's about transforming the way you communicate, and the website itself as a platform, to answer your question, is the way that we're going to be able to do that more effectively and efficiently in a 24/7, 365, 60/60 world.
And that's a really great summary. I think you touched on every one of the major points that I'm excited about. And also the fact that you touched on up until now, for the last 6,000 years, whether we're selling goat bladders 6,000 years ago or madmen in the 60s with marketing and advertising, it's always been pontification. We've always pushed our message in front of the customers, hoping that we might strike a chord. But what we're seeing is this change from us pushing our message to really listening to the customers for the first time. Do you agree, David?
Yes, this is David. When I look at social media, and I hear the term, and I think of how it changes the average web page of corporate America. I think that it's really a scarier word than it has to be for most people. Social media, to me, if you just eliminate the term and you say what we're doing is, nobody would have a problem if I sat down at a table and I said, tell me about your company, what it does, and how it works. Everybody has some level of comfort with having a conversation in the offline world. You have to, otherwise you wouldn't be able to make it in business. And really what the online world does is it's taking that conversation to a URL, to any kind of social platform, or any kind of platform for that matter, where you can have this conversation on your own time and you can move from corporate messaging to self-discovery. That when I think of online, I think of we're creating experiences here that have to be experiences that match what goes on in the offline world, but they're different. They're fundamentally different than what you'd have sitting across the table. And the difference is going to be that the audience is a lot more selfish and the audience is a lot faster. So you don't have the time to engage like you would if you sat at the table. You've got to make it happen fast, and you've got to make it relevant and interesting. And that's where all those buzzwords of transparency and being authentic and all that come up. And to me, it's like that's just what normal people do when they sit down and have conversations. You've got to be trustworthy. You've got to be honest. You've got to be real. Otherwise, people are going to look at you and say, whatever, get out. I don't want to do business with you.
And that's a really good perspective, too, and I totally agree with it, that the art of conversation is definitely intact here. We have digital tools to facilitate that conversation, but we're not sitting at a bar table with a beer in front of us and have 2 hours to communicate a thought. With Twitter, we have 140 characters and about 10 seconds to communicate that exact same thought. But the communication tools are kind of the same. You have to listen and then participate. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I sit there, and one of the examples I like to use is I said, if I were, you ever met that guy at the party that never shuts up? You stand there and you listen. All he's got to do is talk about himself. Mm-hmm. And when you're all done, all you're doing in your head is you're thinking of ways to get away from him. You move back to an online experience, and the same thing happens. If all that's going on is you're talking about yourself, your company, and all the things you do, and everything's about this corporate message, then nobody's going to listen. Because when I go to a party, I go there to mingle, get to know people, network, etc. And in that context, I've got to like somebody first before I even want to hear what they have to say.
Great point. It's about
actually. I agree, David. I think that's an awesome example of how we react in the online world versus in addition to the real world. I want to point to the one difference between having that face-to-face real world conversation and that digital conversation is that everybody else gets to listen in, because generally speaking, it's not in a private setting or a secure setting. It's in a public setting. So you not only have this conversation taking place with those prospects, but there are going to be thousands of people and thousands of prospects sitting around watching you have that same conversation without even telling you they're there. So you lack the anonymity or the privacy that you might receive in the private or real world, and move it into a public space where everyone thinks they can have the opportunity to listen, even if they don't want to necessarily tell you they are.
And you make a You make a great point there, James, because that drives right into the whole idea of how a lot of business leaders look at this and start worrying about liability and what these conversations are and how they're taking shape. And it's something I really hadn't thought of, because when I look at that comment to say we're concerned about what people are saying about us, well, what are your salespeople saying when they meet people face-to-face? You don't have recorders sitting at those tables, but the difference is you also don't have the whole world listening in.
Yeah, so it's quite a different conversation. And I think the same could be said, too, is what happens when you as a company aren't at that conversation. You're not having that conversation. You're not blogging. You're not out there. I think that has a negative effect as well. You're not at the party.
You do have to. This is James. You do have to be seen, and that's the big thing with companies who aren't being seen at the party, who aren't being seen in the conversations online, are the ones that are missing the opportunity to get customers who are prospects to become customers.
And that's our goal. I mean, the two goals is to retain customers and to convert prospects. And social media is an incredible set of tools that does that. Let's talk just for a second about those tools, if we could. When you create a web presence, you hear things like blogs and Flickr and Twitter and email collection, and the list just kind of goes on and on. It's kind of confusing. What's the right tools? How do you start? How do you pick the right tools for your corporate website?
This is David. I would say that there's so many tools that when we meet people, a lot of times what's happened is they either become paralyzed by so many options and they make no progress, or worse yet, they just go out and say, they use the just try something approach. So they amass a bunch of tools and they decide whatever's hot and being used or they've heard about or they've read about, and then they just start saying, let's implement that, let's implement this. The reality is we make a likeness to building a house. When you make a decision, if you were going to build a home, you wouldn't just send out a backhoe and start digging. You wouldn't start your home building process by going to the furniture store, although my wife does. But regardless, and I say that, but it's kind of true. Some people, I guess, would start at the furniture store and pick out what they want a room to look like. But still, fundamentally, if you're starting at the furniture store, you've made a decision about what you want that house to do. So there's a difference between what type of home you build if you're retired and no kids versus if you have a family of 6. So how you look at your business and fundamentally what you want to accomplish there and how you want to live is going to be how you decide what your web presence and that experience should look like in the context of what you're going to do there and what kind of audience is going to be coming over. So if I'm going to be a big entertainer, then I want a house that's built for entertainment. If I don't want anybody over and we're going to raise a family, then I might have a whole different layout. But in any case, I don't start with experimentation. I don't get caught up in the fact that there's so many choices. I have to step back and say, what am I trying to accomplish? What am I going to do here? And then build the right kind of experience that fits my audience. And that might not include all these tools, and it might get it down to where there's a handful that are relevant.
I agree with that, David. And I think in addition to that point, it's also the fact that this has been a traditional mindset up, say, through about mid-2005, 2006, that everything had to be in one location. And the reality of it is you have different audience members, different prospects, different customers who have different needs in different places on the web. And your initial initiatives online can have multiple presences. You can have microsites that serve specific needs. You can have tools and applications that sit on different platforms. You can have your own site that has different integration with each of those pieces that serve your different audiences. For so long, people have tried to be everything to everyone that they want to serve on one site. And the reality of it is, with the way people search, the way people find information, the way social networks are influencing where people go, even find information, you have to look at where your customers are going to be at in the moment in the prospect decision-making method, so they know exactly where they're going to be at in that moment of making a decision where you might become relevant.
Excellent. The two things that I'm hearing is that before you sit down and just start implementing, you really need to develop a blueprint, kind of think it through. And the second thing is that you can't be everything to everybody, or you're really nothing to everybody. You have to understand the psychological marketing to understand what your customers are looking for.
This is James. I totally agree. In fact, you use the word blueprint. It's very coincidental. It's also one of the processes we use for determining the proper places and methodologies to reach prospects and turn them into customers. We call our process the digital blueprint process. It focuses on breaking down audiences, their use behaviors online, their behaviors of how they consume and engage in information online. And it creates strategies and tactics that certain goals based on where those audiences are going to be at. And that process is a plan that's architected specifically for an individual business. The biggest challenge we see when we work with different businesses, the first question we tend to hear is, well, do I need a blog? Do I need a Twitter account? Do I need these things? And how much is it going to cost me? And those are the wrong questions to start with. We'll get to those points, but we have to first start with what do you actually want to accomplish online and who do you want to reach, and then let's move from there.
So don't jump into the tactics until you understand the strategy.
Exactly.
Now, you guys also have some kind of a copyrighted formula, the vision gap or something we've discussed. That's pretty clever. Can you just give us a quick overview of what that is?
I'd be happy to. This is James. The vision gap is sort of our CEO's brainchild, Brian Gray. I have to make sure I give him credit because it's really something that he sort of brought to the table as sort of a format for how we see organizations' opportunities to succeed in life. You think about all organizations are perfectly aligned to get the results that they get. In other words, everything that you're doing today, if you weren't to change them a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you'd probably continue to get the same kinds of results, whether it's from sales, marketing, product development, business development, etc. We call that your present path. In the context of what we seek to work with organizations and how we seek to pull off really big things, organizations should recognize if I were to change something today, if I were to aspire for something higher, bigger, and greater than we could ever achieve doing the things we continue to do, what would that be? We call it the highest aspirations. And once you identify those highest aspirations, think of big things, like really big things, like if your life depended on it, big things. If your business's success or failure depended on it, big things. We look at the difference between your highest aspirations 2 or 3 years from now and your present path, and we say, what is that difference between those spaces? And we call that your vision gap. And specifically, we look at what would it take using these digital social media tools to help you pull off your biggest aspirations to succeed long term. Wow.
Well, that's an incredible way to develop. That's our best way to start to develop this blueprint.
It absolutely is. And in fact, for us as an organization, it helps us align with the kinds of companies that really do want to pull off big things. David, do you want to talk about in the context of that, like how it helps us identify what organizations really seem to work well with MediaSoft?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. What I was going to comment there is, like, James does a better job of articulating that than I would, but I would say we live that model. And when you live that model, you're only good partners with people who are wanting something different as well. So when we look at the marketplace, we have to find people that are trying to pull off something that is, if you're getting what you want, we're a bad fit. And a lot of people, when you ask the question, say, are you getting what you want, they always want more, but there is truly only a few organizations that really do, that really live that. Everybody will agree that you want more, but deep within, what is the fundamental desire that's driving that? And if it's not present, it'll never happen. An example I use that's simple, but, I knew 2 guys that were going to quit smoking, and one of them at the new year, and one of them 5 days into the new year was smoking again. And I asked him and was talking to both of them. They both seemed as committed, but the underlying desire for why he wanted to quit smoking, one of them was thinking about having a family and raising kids. The other one, his girlfriend told him to. So the girlfriend told you to only lasts 5 days before you're smoking again. The other guy that has a fundamental life change coming quits forever. So the whole idea is that everybody can say they want something, but truly your desires have to match it. And we look for organizations. It's a tough prospect to find organizations that really have the desire to do something different than they're doing now.
But it seems to me that if you can find those organizations, that's really where the exciting work is, because you are making these major transformations using the most incredible tools available to us today.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Yeah, and when you look at it, it's like that's where we come up and start talking. We want to be in the transformation business because we want to help somebody, an organization that has those really grassroots desires to do something different and to pull off something great and to live the model we're living. That's who we want to work with because that's where the exciting work is.
Wow. I love that idea.
This is James. And from a business perspective, that's how we recruit, too. I mean, we're looking to hire people that work in this organization who want to think big every single day and don't want to do boring, average, mediocre stuff. And, when we talk about prospecting for customers or even the ability for us to look and align ourselves with the right business partners, it's all about people who have that highest aspiration and understand that achieving your highest aspirations requires risk. It's not the safe road. It's the road that requires you recognizing that there's a massive difference between where you want to be and where you're going, and being willing to make the commitment personally, mentally, culturally as an organization to align the resources and the initiatives to get you in a place to be able to achieve those highest aspirations.
And that's a
that's a good place to say. I mean, fundamentally, if you say all those things, it's like, yeah, we're looking for people that really want it because they want to do something different and they want to change, not because their girlfriend told them to.
Absolutely. And change is often painful. Most people don't like change. There's certain people like us that I think thrive on it, but change can be somewhat painful and costly and risk, and that's painful. But there's the reward.
Our CEO, Brian, talks about the fact that really transformation is not an evolution, but a revolution. And in the context of being able to recognize that with a revolution and being in a revolutionary times within your organization, you have to admit that some people are probably going to get hurt. And I think about that. Do you know any real revolutions in the history of man where somebody didn't get hurt? And you probably have a hard time naming one where that's not the case. So from a perspective, this risk also includes the upsetness of some potential cultures, the reality that some people just aren't meant to be in an organization that's going to transform, and the reality that you might have to hire for the kinds of people who are looking to completely change the paradigm in a way that's going to cause some uncomfortable situations. It's going to cause some tough business decision challenges to be made, but that's okay, because if you really want to pull off something big, that's going to be just a necessary evil.
That's terrific advice, because I think of the corporations that I speak to, they're scared, and they're scared of those type of people, and they're scared of that kind of change, and they're scared of losing control. But I think you're absolutely right. You're going to have some type of chaos anyway. It's better to have controlled chaos than just random. Excellent.
I agree. We have a client right now who's a Fortune 500 company, and one of the executives of the organization who has engaged us in some services to relaunch one of their products. The reality of it is, what she's asked us to do is to transform an organization in a way that even threatens her opportunity, threatens her as an individual's career path. But the recognition that things have to be different, can be better, and be more effective with using more effective digital social media tools than the traditional old methods is something that really creates promise for the organization to say there is a future. And I think that executives who are willing to not be selfish about the decision-making, but be selfless for the organization are the ones who are probably going to prosper the most long-term.
I love it. That's a great summary. And I hate to go from this incredible bird's eye view down into the weeds, but I want to talk just a little bit about some of these tools. Is a blog all that necessary for a company? I mean, do you really need, can you speak to why that's important?
This is David. I love blogs. I love them. I read them all the time. I'm not much of a blogger myself, which sounds contradictory, but I think that blogs as a social media tool, my thoughts on social media are always this. It's like you have to do what fits you, and blogging doesn't seem comfortable for me just yet. Neither does Twitter. I pay attention to both of them. I'm involved in both of them, but I always liken social media to just how the social world works. I'm a 40-some-year-old guy with 2 small kids, so I don't go to the bar every night. And that's kind of what Twitter is to me. I may be interested in it, and I can bring it right into my phone and pay attention to it, but blogging, the same thing goes. It's something I read, and it's my major source of information. We use it as an opportunity to drive traffic to our site, but we're very strategic with how that happens. In other words, I think a lot of organizations would say, we need a blog, let's start blogging, and then the topics aren't really centric to a strategy of what you're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you can have some outlandish blog post that generates 100 comments, and if there are 100 comments from people you don't want to talk to or aren't in your audience pool, or aren't anybody who's going to drive a transaction or cause something to happen within your business, then I'd much rather see a more pointed blog post that had 4 comments from people that were our audience, and we were creating conversations with the people that we're going to do business with. So when I look at blogs as an example of a tactic, I'd say I love what they do. Primarily, we use them to drive traffic and to get our customers engaged in conversation, and as a platform to put out thoughts and topics that establish ourselves as thought leaders and get the dialogue started. But we make sure always that they are based on a strategy that fits our business.
And I think that's...
I totally agree. And, being a blogger by itself isn't the answer to driving business. There are hundreds of companies who have blogs that don't generate any business whatsoever because they blog without relevancy or content that's unique or insightful. I think part of the opportunity for an individual to become a blogger is to be able to share and showcase a level of expertise or insight that others don't have. That's what makes them successful. blogs as a fundamental tool for business is good because blogs, with the proper use, can drive traffic for long-tail searches on search engines because they're highly optimized, specified content that is typically very search engine friendly. Products like WordPress and others provide fantastic SEO capabilities so that when people are doing searches for very niche topic areas that you might have written about, you can drive business and awareness to your organization for that topic. To blog for the sake of being heard isn't necessarily the value within doing it. It's the driving opportunity that David mentions in terms of having a reason, having a strategy, and being aligned with that strategy with everything you do around it. I'll use a great example of MediaSauce. We have some individuals at MediaSauce who blog on a frequent basis on a personal level. It's all about their thoughts and ideas on really cool creative art concepts for the web. And that works very well for them in terms of creative expression. And so in some capacities, those blogs align very well with some of our strategic initiatives as an organization to showcase our skill sets and abilities to deliver really highly interactive and engaging content. On the same note, we can make posts about my experience last night at Pizza Hut, or I can say about my experience yesterday buying a GM vehicle, which are interesting but not necessarily relevant to social media unless I find it a perfectly aligned message with the strategies that fulfill our business. And I think the challenge for organizations who choose to blog is to, one, find someone who's going to blog who is engaging and insightful, and then two, understand and clearly communicate the expectations of the blog's alignment with the strategy to lead to results.
Wonderful. And the more that I get involved in social media, the more I keep likening the marketing to being at this proverbial cocktail party. If you just go into the cocktail party and just continually blog or talk about yourself, you're going to lose the interest of the people around you. But if you have this, what's in it for me, if you're adding relevant, good content to that conversation, then you'll have everybody's attention.
Yes, I completely agree, Lon. Cool.
Here's kind of a big question that kind of builds onto this blog thing. You hear the word build community. I interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk, which is an awesome guy. He's the king of building community with his 600-plus videos and his winelibrary.com. What does the blog help build community? What does build community mean? Is that important?
This is David. I'll go first because I've got a simple response to that. It really fits with my comparison to how offline works. It's like the term community to me comes from a neighborhood, how you live and interact in your personal community. So when I live in a subdivision that the houses are very close together and everybody's has to become acquainted with one another, and you develop good friendships in there. And there are some people that you are less friendly with, but everybody knows everybody to some degree. When I operate in this community, there is you establish those friendships by being fair, honest, transparent, good conversationalists, all those kind of things, and then you find people with the same kind of interests. It just takes more time to work in an 1,100 house subdivision than it would be to find that online as you start to poke around and spend hours in the evening while the TV's on, and you give it kind of your partial attention, and you find relationships in there that make sense. But the whole idea of community, what the word's from, is friendship, and I'm not friends with anybody that I think is dishonest, that I don't know anything about, and I think they're unfair. My friends, on the other hand, are people who are real, like me, share common interests, good folks, people I want to spend time with. And you've got to look at how you create community from the standpoint of how you create business friends, just like you create personal friends. And when you talked about the wine guy, as a fan myself, all the tools he uses and how he acts, it's like I feel like I'm in his living room every time I'm on his site.
Trust. It gets back.
To add to that, I think the idea of creating community. Do blogs create community? Absolutely. When people create and identify affinity to the person who's writing the blog. In the concept of creating community, I think what makes the wine website successful versus, say, other communities that have attempted to launch in it are that, one, it fulfilled a void in a way that no one else had filled yet. Part of making successful communities is finding the niche and category and the voice within that category that there's enough people who will align with it to seek affinity with you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest thing is, there are people who create very successful communities being exceptionally controversial. I mean, there are hundreds of case studies of websites with small groups, but nonetheless powerful and passionate groups who use the sites on a regular basis, use blogs and other mechanisms of social networks to drive on a particular agenda or purpose. I think the biggest thing that when you're creating this idea of community and you're aligning it with your organization's products or services, identifying what might people be most passionate about, and more importantly, who can we have lead those conversations in a way that has a transparent appearance of passion, belief, and knowledge.
And I think passion is really important when it comes to a blog, because that gets back to the transparency. If you're doing it because the vice president told you to do it, it's going to be a lot different than if you're writing something that you're positively passionate about, and it comes through.
Yeah, this is David. I agree completely, because that goes back to the whole thing. It's like, did your girlfriend tell you to? And when you look at it instead in an organization, so a lot of times that's how it starts. It's like, everybody blog. I don't care, blog. And then what happens is people use that as a forum just to say stuff. And if you're saying stuff that doesn't matter to your business or what you're trying to accomplish, then it's just stuff. Then it just gets cluttered and messy, and you start attracting people that don't have any interest. And it doesn't do anybody any good. And I think that organizations should be taking a more calculated approach to how that happens. And you find people that are passionate about subjects. We call them ambassadors in our organization. We find those ambassadors that match up with different pieces of social media and that they're very passionate about, and they're on all the time, and there's nothing you have to force, and we make them responsible for it. Then they're the content specialist, and they're the person that brings the things to the table and informs the entire organization about a complete understanding of that platform.
Excellent. And I love the word ambassador, because the marketing and public relations and communications department isn't necessarily usually the best ambassador. They're great when it comes to the technical application of communication, but often it's the line person. It's in a lot of cases it's the receptionist who's really the ambassador.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I look at it and I go, to every single person out there running a business, it's like there's somebody in your organization that is a perfect fit for the social media tools that you want to use, and it may not be your VP of marketing.
Excellent. And
that's okay.
Yeah, and that's a strong statement.
Great.
That's going to scare people, especially that VP. When we're talking about two-way communication, I mean, that's what we're talking about now is two-way communication, because by creating a blog, you get the opportunity to have people comment. What I hear often from the companies that I do consulting with is that they're afraid to start a blog because they don't know how to control the message. It's always about keeping it on message, keeping the corporate image, and limiting liabilities. Can you speak a little bit about approving and spamming and deleting comments and how to manage the whole blog thing, and that you can actually keep some control on it?
James, go ahead.
James, I'd be happy to answer on that. The biggest fear, I think, when people are participating in blogs and other social networks that the company sponsors or manages or promotes is the idea that your competition might come online and try to take over the conversation, potentially misrepresent fact as their own sleight of hand, so to speak, or worse, that dissatisfied customers might come online and actually tell you that they're not happy. There's this immediate reaction, I think, for business executives who don't understand the importance of engagement to say, let's just remove everything. And unfortunately, that's the worst thing that can possibly take place, not necessarily because the consumers who are using the site will see it, because there are certain times where comments are submitted or things are submitted without it being that require approval. The reality of it is, if everybody was perfect, if every business was perfect, we wouldn't have a need for social media to be a reference point for us to make business decisions. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is we do know that everyone isn't perfect and that businesses aren't always going to be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, and that there's going to be differences that make the decision of buying their products or services right for me or not. And organizations who can allow that diversity of conversation, in some cases the negative conversation, embrace it and address it, we'll see the biggest success. I use a great example. I used to work with a television station where somebody used to go onto their website on a frequent basis and constantly complain about their coverage. And the general manager of the TV station said, I do not want that person's comments on the site anymore. I want them blocked. And when you look at what the commentary that the individual was saying, it wasn't to be confrontational, it was to make them better. And so the reality of it, the solution was, I was able over time to convince the TV station general manager to actually embrace this person, invite them in to be a critic offline, and to help provide insight to how to make them better from a viewer's perspective. And it created a formal viewers panel over time that gave opportunity for those who were the harshest critics or had the highest expectations for the organization to be able to voice their opinion in a way that was constructive and not destructive. And I think organizations across the board have a huge opportunity to look at criticism as an opportunity to either be negative because they just want to be negative, i.e. when the competition storms your site, versus when consumers have honest, authentic concerns and embrace them to make you better. And tell people that you want to be better and that you're embracing their constructive criticism to be better.
Absolutely love that, and I full-heartedly agree. Recently, I interviewed Jody Gannant. She's a songwriter, musician. She's absolutely amazing. She was involved in the One Red Paperclip. I think she was transaction number 14. And I just got it. I had spent 14 hours that day writing a chapter, but I wanted to make sure that her podcast got up, and my 2 paragraphs had like 3 or 4 errors. Typographical errors, and that was my fault, and I shouldn't have. And almost instantly, I got a kind of a scathing comment from one of her fans who said, how are you going to write a 650-page book on social media if you can't write 2 paragraphs on Jody Gannant? And I got to tell you, my finger was on that delete button for a full 30 seconds because I was really angry about that. But then I thought, you know what? She's absolutely right. There should not have been typos. I shouldn't have posted it. So I commented back on it, and I just simply said, how do I do it? With really good editors and help from the community. And then everybody had a big laugh about it, and it showed that I was human, and we all make mistakes.
Yeah, it's really difficult for, this is James again, this is really difficult for individuals and then businesses, as a business formally, to accept making mistakes. And when organizations online admit mistakes and then take the effort to correct them, it not only tells the existing customer who's having the issue that you care about them as an individual and as a source of income, but it tells all the prospects who are anonymously watching and reviewing what you're doing to recognize that you are a company that has an interest in the individual customer and be more influenced to make a purchasing decision with you.
And you care and you have integrity.
This is David. I would also say, too, the conversations are happening. It's where do you want them to happen? And everybody's got to be concerned with their online reputation, just as you have to be concerned with your reputation in general. And that being said, those conversations are occurring out there in the online world, and why not host them?
Yeah.
I always look at those conversations that occur, and I think one of the things that's another point is it's not a subtlety at all, but it's like work towards creating conversations, not arguments. And arguments are what happen when you don't like what somebody says and you respond harshly. Mm-hmm. And I speak a lot, and a lot of times when you look at a room and you say there's 100 people in here listening to what I have to say, how many of them are liking it? And at the end you do this evaluation to understand your performance.
Right.
That being said, it's like, what do you do with those evaluations? Do you throw them in the trash when there's criticism there, or do you try to make yourself better from it? And I think that's really the difference of how a company is successful or unsuccessful in this. If you look at those criticisms or suggestions, or no matter how harsh they are, they're opportunities to reach out to somebody to make yourself better. And if you don't want to or appreciate that, then it's the equivalent of speaking to a large audience, taking all the negative things, throwing them in the trash, and saying, well, they just don't get it.
Absolutely, and you're doing this publicly. There's a catharsis that you're showing everybody that you care.
Yeah, and it's not healthy for an organization.
Exactly, and again, to liken it to this fictitious cocktail party, you're at the party and you hear a group of people across the room talking about you and kind of dissing you. Well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to stand on the other side of the room, or are you going to step into the conversation and just add your perspective and apologize or whatever is necessary, and then by the time you leave that group, the entire group knows that you have integrity.
Exactly. You're not going to walk over there and fight with them and create an argument about it. You're going to try to politely get yourself into a better spot with that group, and that's what online, because it's more anonymous, it's easier to get into some kind of harsh conflict, as we've all experienced through email.
Sure.
Same thing's going on online. It's on a website or a forum. It's easier to be a little more critical, a little more harsh there, and I think that's just you've got to be the better person. You've got to make a conversation out of it rather than creating an argument.
I love it. And to build on this, the comment marketing in particular, and subscribing and trackbacks and all these terms that most of these corporations aren't familiar with. Can one of you just kind of address a little bit about comment marketing, participating in other people's blogs, subscribing, trackbacks, that kind of stuff?
This is James. I'd be happy to answer. the biggest opportunity that businesses have is, instead of trying to spread your message through your own materials, is to go out and find where people are already talking about you, your services, and or your competition, and engage and participate in those conversations. We work with clients who often say, I'm not even getting in the door. My competition is the one getting the business, and I'm not even on the radar screen because I'm smaller, or because I'm not in that geographic area, or because my product doesn't have the brand recognition that they have, etc. And I say to them, your biggest opportunity is to actually create an outbound marketing communication strategy online, where you actually go out and find what people are talking about them or you, and doing so in places that are off of your site, off of your normal communication or formal communication channels, and talking about yourself. And it doesn't mean blatantly doing self-promotion in the context of, hey, buy James Inc. services instead of Mike Inc. services, because James Inc. services are so much better. It's not that. It's actually being a part of the conversation like you're a real person and not just a marketing machine. It's a difficult challenge, I think, for most corporate marketing and communications professionals to recognize that in the online world, being a part of those conversations is adding relevant and pertinent conversation, and being present as an organization needs to be more subtle than direct. It's almost like you imagine the used car salesman who's on the TV ads where it's buy now, that loud noise and annoying voice coming into any conversation that you're in. All of a sudden, it's like this slam, or as I would say, really more of a spam of information about the organization saying, here's what I have to offer, don't do that, buy from me. When the reality of it is, if you can participate in communication, you'll gain credibility in a way that people will want to at least consider you before they make purchasing decisions.
Great. Can you imagine that same plaid jacket car salesman walking up to a group at a party and saying, Sunday, 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 bring the kids? It would have the response.
I think we've had that guy come to our party at one point or two, haven't we?
Everybody's got one of those.
There's always one of those at a party. I don't know why there is.
I don't know where you guys are going.
Yeah, let's not go there. This is incredible. We're over 40 minutes. I love this. I just want to keep talking to you guys. We got to do some kind of a follow-up subsequent, because I've still got a whole list of questions I want to ask you guys. But for our listeners' ears, we're going to try to wrap this one up. Is there any success stories or anything else that you'd like to add about social media enhanced websites? Some way that you want to kind of summarize what we've been talking about?
This is David. I'll go first with just some simple thoughts. I think everybody's got to look at their audience first and their goals. Their goals, then their audience, and then how they're going to achieve it. So you've got to put together a plan. And you've got to think in terms of moving from an online destination to an experience. You've got to think in terms of thinking of people as customers of your product, to consumers of your brand. And I think you've got to work from corporate telling to self-discovery and allow that conversation to just blossom. And really think of it as think of yourselves as platform agnostic, and decide what platforms work for your business and for your goals and your strategies, and then pay attention to what goes on in the world, because a lot of them are emerging and changing every day.
Wow, great summary. Peter?
I completely agree with David, and I had the point, do you want an evolution of your business, or do you want a revolution of your business? And I think organizations, if you had to think through what the opportunities a revolution might create for your bottom line, for your satisfaction in the day-to-day activities that you do, and for the future of your business, and identify what that revolution means for you, what the ROI would be, and then find out what would be worth investing to achieve that ROI 2-3 years from now, and then move forward with making that plan. Because if you can identify your highest aspirations, you have a much higher opportunity to make a big impact in your own personal life as well as your organization's long-term success.
Wow, excellent summary. I love that. Excellent. And I know that the listeners are going to want to know the answer to this question. Where do they find out more about you guys in MediaSauce?
MediaSauce.com, MEDIASAUCE.com is where you can find our online experience. And I would say that our business, like most businesses, is all about the people. So at MediaSauce.com, you will see a showcase of our people, what they're about, what they like, what they do, because they are MediaSauce.
And you have saucers.
Yes, exactly.
Your employees are called saucers. I love that. Well, thank you, guys. I'd really like to thank David Cain, President of MediaSauce, and James Burns, Vice President of MediaSauce, for both being with us here today to talk about social media enhanced websites and social media. So, David, James, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lon.
Yeah, thank you, Lon. Appreciate your time.
This has been Lon Safko, the co-author of the Social Media Bible. Be sure to check out our other valuable social media tactics, tools, and strategies that can be found at the Social Media Bible book and its companion website, www.thesocialmediabible.com. And for more information about me, Lon Safko, please, by all means, go on over to my website at www.lonsafko.com. And again, guys, truly, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.